to actor Jason Momoa has been involved in a vehicle crash with a motorcyclist near Calabasas.
Just when everyone thought he was at the peak of his career, Jason Momoa, the man behind our favorite Aquaman, might be spending the rest of his life behind bars, and the reason for this is quite disturbing. For so long, fans around the globe only saw Jason as a Hollywood sensation who could make even the weirdest role, like talking to fish, look cool.
What's your relationship like with fish now? When you pass a fish tank, do you want to chat to him?
I just did yesterday, yes. I love chatting to him.
I bet he said that. Jason also, if you haven't noticed, he can speak to anybody.
So, what could have possibly gone wrong to warrant Jason Momoa being locked away forever? Why could he possibly be going to jail? Join us as we unravel the mystery. Jason is going to jail. Not many can deny the bag of talents that Jason Momoa represents. However, a chaotic recent event surrounding his career is currently causing not just Hollywood and America, but also the entire globe to quake. So what is this chaotic event about, and what exactly might Jason be going to jail for? The answer to this question points to a controversy that has to do with nothing other than forced intimacy, which makes things even more surprising. What could Jason Momoa possibly have to do with forced intimacy? Although Jason Momoa remains a talent that is greatly admired around the world, the issue of forced intimacy is one problem that seems to have plagued his career in recent times, leaving fans and admirers shocked and mostly disappointed. Sadly, it is this same problem that is currently threatening to put an end to his freedom and career. But the question is, what could have tied such a flawless actor to controversies around forced intimacy? The answer to this question will amaze you. Recently, a disturbing clip about Jason Momoa resurfaced on the internet, painting a disturbing picture of the actor who seems to be dearly loved by all. In the clip, which has become a huge problem, Jason Momoa allegedly stated that getting away with forcing intimacy with beautiful women was what he loved about being a science fiction and fantasy star. Sadly, the result of this clip has been tremendous on the negative side, causing an uproar from fans and critics alike around the globe. Responding to the clips, some have even described the event in the clip as horrifying, with the statement of Jason threatening to tear down his reputation amongst fans. Before now, many had held the talented actor on a high pedestal, which seems to be crumbling as some brought up the possibility that Jason Momoa might not be the great guy everyone thought he was. With Jason's statement came other shocking questions. Was Jason Momoa the kind of person who saw forced intimacy as something that should be enjoyed? And was he a perpetrator of the act? The questions remain numerous, causing greater disturbance in Hollywood, which already seems to be filled with drama. Thanks to the resurfacing of this clip, all eyes are being narrowed on the iconic actor, and investigations around his activities are becoming unavoidable. In the end, forced intimacy remains a crime and unacceptable if found guilty, and even a celebrity like Jason Momoa cannot be stopped from going to jail. Today, as the recent event around Jason Momoa continues to unfold, the world lies tense, bracing itself for what may unfold in the coming days. For now, however, numerous questions continue to emerge, with fans asking questions like, why Jason Momoa would make a statement so offensive in the first place? Is there a mix-up somewhere? Well, the answer to these questions takes us all the way back to 2011, when a controversial event that would forever impact Jason's career took place. Keep watching to find out. A controversial event in 2011. In order to understand the controversial event that has forever impacted Jason Momoa's career and how the horrifying clip came about, we have to start from the beginning. As opposed to what everyone expects, the chaos regarding why Jason Momoa might be going to jail took root in 2011, beginning with the release of HBO's hit series Game of Thrones. Now, let's talk about an interesting part of the show that not many people talk about, and how Jason Momoa's controversy comes into play. Game of Thrones first hit TV screens on HBO on April 17, 2011, and it quickly became a global sensation. Based on George R.R. Martin's book series A Song of Ice and Fire, the show was packed with drama, epic battles, and shocking twists that kept fans hooked. The show was praised for its complex characters, stunning visuals, and intense political battles between powerful families fighting for the Iron Throne. By the time seasons 3 and 4 rolled around, Game of Thrones had become a cultural phenomenon. People were constantly talking about it, memes flooded the internet, and Sunday nights became Game of Thrones nights for millions. As expected, Game of Thrones dominated award shows, broke viewership records, and had one of the most passionate fan bases ever. But here's the interesting part. While various factors contributed to the immense success of Games of Thrones, the skillful contributions of talents like Jason Momoa were something that could not go unnoticed. As a matter of fact, it remains undeniable that Jason Momoa played a huge role in Game of Thrones becoming a hit, even though he was only in the first season, which was relevant to the success of the show. While on the show, Jason Momoa played the role of Khal Drogo, the fierce Dothraki warlord, and his performance left a lasting impact on the show and its fans. While a lot of people didn't know much about Momoa at the time, his powerful presence, intense fight scenes, and deep but silent chemistry with Emilia Clarke's Daenerys Targaryen made him unforgettable. Although he barely speaks English in the show, Jason Momoa is able to make Drogo feel larger than he is in life. And to crown it all, his emotional death scene is one of the first major heartbreaks of the series. Here, we must admit that Jason was also positively impacted in his career by merely being a part of the show. Hence, even after leaving the show, Momoa remained a fan favorite. His portrayal of Khal Drogo helped Game of Thrones gain early momentum, and his career skyrocketed afterward, leading him to become Aquaman and a Hollywood superstar. While all of these sound good, it is sadly also true that the recent hotspot that Jason Momoa seems to be in regarding forced intimacy is also a result of the role he played in Game of Thrones. The controversy began with an interview with Jason Momoa and his fellow cast members of Game of Thrones in 2011. Here, Jason had been making a comment about the show and what he enjoyed about the science fiction and fantasy genre in Hall H. It is at this point that he points out that as far as science fiction and fantasy are concerned, he loved the fact that there were so many things he could do. He further stated at this point that one of those things that could be done included the freedom of ripping out someone's tongue without any consequences. As the interview continued, things were already getting bizarre at this rate, but Jason did not stop there. Rather, he further stated that another thing that he could do in sci-fi and fantasy movies without consequences is have forced intimacy with beautiful women, giving viewers the shock of their lives. As for the immediate reaction of all that were present, Jason's fellow cast members, including Lena Headey, could be seen in the footage looking embarrassed while the crowd laughed to lighten the situation. Here, you would think that it was all over and that Jason Momoa had merely accidentally made a bad joke, but that wasn't the case. At a later time in the same year, Jason Momoa would be found talking more on the issue during an interview with the New York Post. Here, he further explained what he meant by sexually assaulting beautiful women. During the interview, he explained that by beautiful women, he was referring to none other than Emilia Clarke in Game of Thrones, stating that in the scene where he forcefully became romantically intimate with Emilia, he loved her, but he was hurting her, and she was crying. To the surprise of all, he spoke fondly of the scene, stating that they could have made it longer. Intriguingly, Jason didn't stop there, but added that he would not forcefully be intimate with anyone because he preferred that his women enjoyed romantic intercourse with him. This could have been an attempt of Jason to redeem himself. However, Jason was not successful in redeeming himself, and the result of this is recent chaos and the threat of jail time. So the question is, what happens next? Is Jason Momoa really going to jail? Jason is appealing for redemption. So far, Jason Momoa's comments during the interview about forcing intimacy with beautiful women have been heavily frowned upon, receiving an intense backlash from far and near. Sadly, the event remains one that continues to haunt his career, with Jason's statement being one that people argue to be an encouragement of violence towards women. Now, Jason Momoa isn't the only one suffering from the aftermath of his statements. As a matter of fact, Game of Thrones as a show has also been accused of propagating violence towards women, which many see as a crime against humanity. However, HBO, the show's producers, have not been silent through this backlash. Instead, HBO's executive, Casey Bloys, recently responded to the accusations, stating that violence in Game of Thrones was not just specific to women, but also included men. According to him, it is indiscriminate and involves violence in general, as men were killed as well. The trouble that Jason Momoa's statement has ignited is clearly huge. However, his colleagues, on their part, have tried to be supportive. When asked about what she thought about the situation recently, Emilia Clarke simply drew attention to the consensual romance that followed the initial forced intimacy scene, stating that it was genius. She also added that the forced intimacy scene was a part of the whole story, and that it was vital in order for the audience to feel empathy for Daenerys. As for Jason Momoa, he has not relented in trying to seek redemption following the public backlash stirred up by his statement. As a matter of fact, Momoa has recently apologized for his comments in an Instagram post, which stated, "I awoke in Australia to the justified reactions by many people to a distasteful joke I made years ago in Hall H, for which I am sorry." He further continued by saying, "I am still severely disappointed in myself at the insensitivity of my remarks that day. I know my sincerest apology now won't take away those hurtful words." According to Jason, forced intimacy and harassment are something that can reach anyone, and he has seen it firsthand, including its painful torment among members of his own family and friends. He explained that he truly made a tasteless comment. It was unacceptable, and he sincerely apologized with a heavy heart for the words he said. Regarding going to jail, there has been no real evidence of forced intimacy associated with Jason Momoa apart from his statement, which was clearly a mistake, so going to jail might not be something Jason would be doing anytime soon. In the meantime, Jason Momoa has been actively involved in various endeavors that showcase his commitment to environmental preservation and have contributed to reviving his popularity among fans. In 2022, Jason Momoa was named the United Nations Environment Programme's Advocate for Life Below Water. In this role, he raises awareness about issues like plastic pollution and the importance of marine conservation. In 2018, Momoa portrayed Arthur Curry in Aquaman, which was a success. Adding to that, its sequel, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which was released in 2022, has been well received by audiences worldwide.
The canal connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, allowing ships to avoid sailing around the tip of South America. 40% of all U.S. container traffic passes through it.
These massive cargo ships carry everything from consumer electronics to raw materials. But the longer they're stuck out here in the Pacific Ocean, the later they arrive in ports up and down the U.S. coast.
110 years after its construction, the Panama Canal, the world's largest canal, has suddenly dried up. This amazing work of engineering magnificence, constructed through Central America for over 40 years by the concerted effort of over 40,000 workers, might soon be no more. With frequent reports of water shortages in the Panama region, the fate of the Panama Canal hangs in the balance. This could mean a disruption in global trade and a massive decline in Panama's vast economy, mainly built around canal revenue. Is this the end of an era for the Panama Canal? Can the Panama Canal be saved from this speculated doom? Join us as we learn about the current state of Panama Canal and the real reason it's quickly drying up. Popularly referred to as the crossroads of the world, the Panama Canal is an engineering marvel that has, for over a century, served as a pivotal shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Before its completion, ships had to navigate the treacherous Cape Horn, daring tumultuous storms and adding significant time to their journeys. With the canal in place, maritime routes were shortened dramatically, revolutionizing global trade. However, in a revelation that has astounded the world, the Panama Canal, an engineering marvel and a lifeline for global trade, is facing an unprecedented water crisis and is at the brink of drying up. What could be the cause of this alarming water depletion in one of the world's most crucial waterways? There's more to the cause of this crisis, but first, let's get into the history of the Panama Canal and what it means to the world.
This is the Panama Canal. It's 100 years old. These are the original gates, the original locks.
Especially for maritime trade. This artificial waterway, translated in Spanish as Canal de Panama, is a man-made 82-kilometer sea path in Panama built to connect the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean, cutting across the Isthmus of Panama and serving as a route for maritime trade. The canal is engineered with locks at each end to lift ships to Gatun Lake, an artificial freshwater lake 26 meters above sea level, created by storing water from the Chagres River and Lake Alajuela in Panama. The canal is one of the largest and most difficult engineering projects ever undertaken. The first attempt to carve something of this sort through the narrow land bridge of Panama began in 1881. Colombia, which controlled the land then, permitted a French company called the Comp Universel du Canal Interos to build a canal. This company was led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, who had recently achieved great success building a similar canal in Egypt called the Suez Canal. But the Panama Canal was set to prove how daunting a task it was to dig through mountains. Inspired by his past accomplishment, Ferdinand de Lesseps set out to build a sea-level canal in Panama. An impossible attempt according to another engineer, Adolphe Gaudin de Lépinay, who, having studied the Panama land closely, proposed that building dams at two locations, Gatun and Miraflores, to create large lakes that would be filled with water and be connected using locks to raise and lower ships between the different water levels to connect them to the oceans. His plan eventually became the blueprint for the Panama Canal and established him as a visionary engineer, but that was after Lesseps's failure. The French company, unfortunately, ignored Adolphe's advice and embarked on a doomed venture with their initial vision, leading to massive loss of lives and resources.
It was an amazing feat of engineering. It was designed by the French, finished by the Americans, and 20,000 workers died of malaria and yellow fever constructing this.
By an act of mischief, Lesseps kept the investment and supply of workers flowing long after it was obvious that the targets were not being met until the entire money ran out. The French company went bankrupt in 1889 after reportedly spending $287 million and losing an estimated 22,000 men to disease and accidents, wasting the savings of 800,000 investors. Work was suspended on May 15th, and those deemed responsible were prosecuted in the ensuing scandal, known as the Panama Affair. Lesseps and his son Charles were found guilty of misappropriating funds and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. This sentence was later overturned, and Lesseps, at age 88, was never imprisoned. In 1894, another French company, the Compagnie Nouvelle du Canal de Panama, took over the project. This company, in a bid to be better, maintained a minimal workforce and tried to keep the project afloat while actively looking for a buyer. Philippe Bunau-Varilla, the French manager of the new Panama Canal Company, eventually persuaded Lesseps that a lock and lake canal was more realistic than a sea-level canal, and so a blueprint was designed to achieve the lock model proposed. By Providence in 1902, the U.S., having indicated interest in constructing the Panama Canal, passed the Spooner Act that allowed the purchase and usage of materials belonging to Compagnie Nouvelle du Canal de Panama for building the canal. This was a glimmer of hope for Panama, but they had to complete a negotiation as a condition for construction. The negotiations faced a back and forth, stalling the project's progress. Sensing an opportunity, Panama, with the support of the United States, declared independence from Colombia in November 1903. The United States swiftly recognized Panama's newly claimed independence and entered into negotiations with Panama for the Panama Canal. This gave birth to the Ho-Varilla Treaty, signed in February 1904, which fulfilled the requirements set out in the Spooner Act and established a special zone known as the Panama Canal Zone, where the United States would have control over the canal. In 1904, the United States began work on the canal in earnest. They adopted the proposed French design, and rather than dig through the mountains, they decided to build a canal with locks, which would be cheaper and avoid potential problems caused by differences in sea levels on either side. However, there were still challenges to overcome. The construction project was an expensive endeavor requiring a large workforce. For this new attempt, 40,000 skilled and unskilled people working tirelessly through harsh conditions made the sacrifice. Most of the workers were laborers from the West Indies, while the engineers, administrators, and skilled workers primarily came from the United States, working against all odds and revolutionizing engineering to build the greatest artificial canal in history. One of the most significant innovations of the engineers was the use of steam shovels and giant excavators to dig through the Caliber Cut, later renamed Gillard Cut, in honor of David Deal Gillard, the American engineer who supervised its construction until he died in 1913. Making the Caliber Cut was one of the most challenging aspects of the entire project. The team encountered unstable soil and frequent landslides that tragically claimed numerous lives. Persistent landslides continued for years, dumping millions of cubic yards of material into canal excavations and creating significant setbacks. But the workers were dogged and determined, fighting hard against every mishap, laboring under scorching temperatures, and employing various earth-moving tools to excavate 73 million cubic meters of earth and rock. Even though they did not know, these workers were etching their names in the sands of time, building a path for the world. Their relentless effort finally paid off, and the canal was opened on August 5, 1914.
In 10 years, more than 50,000 men and women built a structure of colossal dimensions. On August 15, 1914, the Panama Canal was inaugurated.
After almost 3 decades of relentless engineering to construct the Panama Canal and the amount of resources involved in this project, it becomes important to ask, since its conception, how has the world benefited from daring to undertake the building of this shortcut? And what has been the impact of the Panama Canal on international commerce? Since its beginning in 1914, the revolutionary Panama Canal has acted as a catalyst and regulator for international trade, increasing the rate at which delivery happens via ship and regulating the international trade atmosphere. The number of ships passing through the canal often reflects the overall health of the world economy, with increased activity signifying a boom and reduced activity signifying a recession. According to statistical data provided by the ACP, around 40% of US-bound cargoes pass through either Los Angeles or Long Beach, while 60% of the traffic transiting the Panama Canal begins or ends its journey at a US port. The competition between ports on the US east and west coasts continues. The Panama Canal has seen a rise in annual cargo traffic from approximately 1,000 vessels transiting commercial traffic to 12,386 ocean-going vessels in 2015, and down to 11,688 ocean-going vessels transiting in 2016. Impressive figures until 2015, right? So what happened in 2016? The drop in fiscal year 2016 was attributed to the many challenges faced by the Panama Canal. Among them was the delay in the opening date of the new Neo-Panamax locks. Utilization levels also decreased due to market conditions, specifically in the USA, with low import volumes and high business inventory levels. Drought restrictions caused by the El Niño weather phenomenon from April until June also prevented vessels from transiting at their full capacity. The dropping in transit is seen largely attributed to the use of DST from the west coast of North America by the major ocean carriers deploying the post-Panamax vessels, particularly the super-large container vessel, which cannot traverse the Panama Canal due to the width constraint of the locks on the Asia-North American trade route. The Panama Canal Universal Measurement System tonnage was 326.8 million a year before 2014, an increase of 1.9% from fiscal year 2013. The total cargo through the Panama Canal registered 222.4 million long tons, an 8.6% increase over the previous year. Before the new waterway expansion, Only 3% of the world's trade was transported through the canal annually, with 68% originating or ending up in the USA. With fiscal year figures dropping since 2016, do you think the world needs to pay closer attention to the Panama Canal? Should we be scared for the fate of the Panama Canal? Yes, the world needs to pay closer attention to the Panama Canal. Yes, we should be scared of its fate. This leads to the big question. What is happening to the Panama Canal? And why is the world's largest canal under threat of a drought? Each trip through the Panama Canal requires a staggering 52 million gallons of fresh water. This water raises and lowers ships as they travel through the different water level sections. This water is sourced from the artificial lakes Alajuela and Miraflores. These lakes rely on rainfall to maintain their levels. Most of this rainwater eventually flows back into the ocean, creating a unique challenge in managing the needs of the Cancanaler vessel navigation with the needs of the people for access to clean water. Since the same water sources that give water to the canal also provide drinking water for over half of Panama's population, around 4.3 million people, deciding which function takes precedence becomes challenging. Nature has maintained this balance for the last 100 years since its construction. Panama is known as one of the wettest countries in the world, supplying both needs simultaneously. The canal and its surrounding lakes have always received ample rainfall to keep them running. However, in 2023, things took a turn for the worse. A combination of two factors caused a significant drop in water levels, particularly in Gatun Lake. The first was a general decrease in rainfall, creating a deficit compared to usual levels. The second factor was the El Niño weather phenomenon.
The canal is going through its driest spell in more than a century as El Niño brings higher temperatures and less rain. The drought is squeezing global supply chains, and that could mean higher prices and less choice for consumers just in time for the holidays.
This phenomenon occurs every few years and is characterized by warmer ocean temperatures that disrupt atmospheric circulation patterns. In Panama and other tropical countries, this disruption weakens or displaces winds that are supposed to bring rainfall, reducing available rainfall. This is a crisis for the Panama Canal that heavily depends on water for functionality. The Panama Canal is now facing a new challenge of managing its water consumption well enough to keep trade going while ensuring that there is enough water to meet the needs of its people. The seemingly increased demand for water caused by reduced rainfall has put a strain on Gatun Lake, which currently faces a daily water deficit of 3 billion liters. So, yes, the Panama Canal is in a crisis. Gatun Lake is losing more water than it is gaining, and this situation has become so critical that the water level in Gatun Lake has dropped to near its lowest point ever recorded, even during the rainy season. These historically low levels have forced the Panama Canal Authority to reduce daily traffic in the canal from 36 to 24 vessels and limit the allowable draft size. These limitations are affecting energy product carriers, container vessels, and ships transporting grain from the United States. For 2024, water levels in March and April at Gatun Lake are projected to be lower than at the start of the year, at only 80 feet in March and 79 feet in April. What would happen to the world if this canal dries up? Imagine waking up one day to realize that Panama Canal, the world's largest canal, has suddenly dried up. For a shipping route that controls almost 3% of world maritime trading activities, 46% of America's export and import activities, and generates over $246 billion annually in revenue, the extinction of the Panama Canal will have a drastic impact on the world's economic activities. Do you think this can be averted? How? The Panama Canal water crisis has again turned the world's attention to the complex, self-balancing, and interconnected nature of our planet's systems. While rainfall is the immediate culprit of this looming disaster, rainfall scientists have pointed out a seemingly ignored factor greatly impacting the fate of the Panama Canal: deforestation, especially in the Amazon. Warming ocean temperatures and dry conditions have undoubtedly affected the canal. Still, a more ominous issue has been consistently ignored. The deforestation of the Amazon and the driest rainy season on record seen in 2023 are raising doubts about the viability of a human-made waterway that was a marvel of engineering when constructed a century ago. It is a known fact that the Panama Canal is highly dependent on rainfall volume. The Amazon rainforest, on the other hand, produces rainfall, generating a self-sustaining cycle that moderates the regional and global climate, as all tropical forests do. Because it is the largest rainforest in the world, the Amazon is often referred to as the planet's air conditioning system. However, as discussed in a climate policy brief in 2019, the Amazon rainforest is much more than a conglomeration of trees that offer cool temperatures to the world. The forest removes carbon from the air and stores it underground, keeping it from rising into the atmosphere. To continue this vital function, the rainforest needs to be preserved. But the menace of deforestation is its biggest enemy. Deforestation can bring the rainforest to a point where it can no longer produce the rain needed to survive. Growing evidence shows that parts of the Amazon release more carbon into the atmosphere than they can capture. That produces two effects. First, more trees die off because of lack of rain, diminishing the rainforest and contributing to more intense and prolonged droughts, such as the one seen in 2023. Second, as more carbon is released into the atmosphere, local and regional rain cycle areas are affected. A drier climate in the Amazon consequently affects thousands of miles to the north and the south of the Amazon. There is evidence that the Amazon's hydrological engine is beginning to fail, exposing the Americas and the rest of the world to catastrophic damage. In 2023, the Amazon experienced its worst drought in recorded history, which scientists attributed to El Niño in Panama, and more broadly to climate change and deforestation. El Niño has grown increasingly severe in recent years because of climate change, which contributes to worsening climate and forest loss. Thus, climate change, deforestation, and the warming of Pacific Ocean waters and their consequences are all intertwined in a vicious circle. What does this mean for the world? Contrary to some public perceptions and assertions, Panama cannot resolve the canal's problems by pumping seawater into Gatun Lake, the Central American nation's main drinking water source. Channeling rivers of clean water can also not be an option, because that action is likely to result in an environmental impact that could damage an entire indigenous community that depends on the river for survival. Since climate change and deforestation go hand in gloves, the future of the Panama Canal seems bleak. This means a great reduction in global trade, especially U.S. exports and imports, and increased shipping costs because of taking longer routes. Is it true that the world might soon come face to face with the headline, Panama Canal, the world's largest canal, which has suddenly dried up? Is there a solution? As noted, there is only saving the Panama Canal with addressing climate change and the deforestation of the Amazon. Some South American countries that play host to the rainforest harboring the rainforest have embarked on individual initiatives to reduce forest loss. But greater coordination among them is desperately needed. Every other nation should not be left out in this fight to reclaim the Amazon and every other tropical rainforest and preserve the Panama Canal. Panamanian authorities have proposed a solution to increase the supply of fresh water in the canal, allowing them to avoid future crises. A potential project involves the construction of a multi-purpose reservoir on the Indio River. The Indio River is outside the canal's watershed, so its construction would require government approval. Based on information on the authorities' website, authorities have already conducted pre-construction studies on the potential reservoir. This will be a long-term project, but it will be worth the while. According to the Panama Canal spokesperson, the project will improve the use and reliability of water from Gatun Lake, the water body through which the canal runs. Can the Panama Canal be saved? What do you think about Jason Momoa's statement? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe for more.